Are you thinking of recruiting for a school in Latin America? If so, how much do you know about the region? Hi, and welcome to Educators Going Global, where we invite aspiring and veteran international educators to expand their knowledge of all things related to international education. My name is Audrey. My co-host David and I each have over 30 years of experience teaching overseas. We're not experts on Latin America, but today we have a guest on the show who is. Meet Mark Weber of the Weber's Ed Recruiting Agency. Mark will answer questions like, when is the main recruiting season? What are some of the less tangible benefits of working in Latin America? And what is school life like? If you'd like to know the answers to these questions and more, your best bet would be to listen to this chat with Mark, a gregarious soul who knows the Latin American international school scene inside and out.
Hello, Mark. We are super psyched to have you come on because you've got a big topic to talk about: Latin America, recruiting, international schools. So thank you for coming on the podcast with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super psyched to be here. So let's do this.
Excelente. So I know where you are, and that gets me super excited. One of my favorite places to be when I'm not in Southeast Asia. So where in the world are you, Mark?
Well, we're in Chiapas, Mexico, which is one of the states in the little south. I used this term with someone the other day and they didn't know what I meant. The little gooseneck at the bottom of Mexico, that's like a curve at the bottom. A lot of people know Oaxaca because Puerto Escondido is one of the famous surfing beaches that everybody knows. And we're in the state right next to that, which is Chiapas, that borders with Guatemala. And we're living in the capital there in Tuxtla Gutierrez. And I'm saying we're really loving it here. It's amazing.
Well, I was reading in your LinkedIn, you put out these wonderful posts, and from your website that it's a move back to Mexico. It's kind of like the full story. That's where you got your start. And Oaxaca is one of my favorite places. And I've been at Zicatela Beach, very scared of those big waves, but I had fun. So this is all wonderful. And off mic, we're talking about all the different stories you could tell. So you do have an educational going global story for us. So please share.
So, yeah, I have a couple of them. I think one of the ones that I really like to talk about a lot is my experience in working in Sudan, Africa. I had a great opportunity there after Malaysia to become the director of fine arts of a new school there. And it was a great experience because, and I don't know if you've seen this post going around on LinkedIn just in the last couple of days, but the director of the school from there posted that yesterday would have been the 20th year anniversary of the school. And I had a great opportunity to go and work there at a family-owned school called KICS. It's Khartoum International Community School. And I got hired by Nigel Winnard, who is a British head of school. He was most recently down in Rio, and I think he's taking a sabbatical now. But anyway, really great guy that allowed me some really good opportunities to come in and work at the school as the director of fine arts. And they had this thing that you will almost never hear because it's a family-owned school by one of the wealthiest men in Sudan. And he was putting up a school that could be really productive for the students because a lot of the families were having to send their kids to boarding schools in the UK. And also they needed a school that was top quality because they were hiring international workers. And one of the things that they wanted, and I found this out later, is that their daughter is a professional theater director in the UK. And so they wanted to have a proper fine arts program. And so that was why they hired me. And so I was very excited to get to do that because the thing they told me, and this was the thing you'll never hear hardly anywhere, is unlimited fine arts budget. You know, And so they said, look, if you can justify the reasons that we need this, we're totally happy to pay for whatever it is and whatever it's going to take. And they had spent quite a bit of money putting up the school. In fact, we had the sound booths and everything. They were downstairs below ground in a basement music room area. And they had built the sound rooms and everything over, I can't remember where they bought them from, but another country. Then they took them apart and shipped them over to Sudan and installed them in down there. And of course, I got to go in and I got to pick the lighting and the sound systems and everything for the theater. We had a 495 seat amphitheater. And so that was really a great opportunity. So one of the things in my interview that they asked me about is they said, do you have an idea of a production that you'd like to do as the main theater production for the students? And I said, yeah, actually, I'm a big used bookstore fan. And I had been in Chicago and there was a bookstore over there, I think it's still over there, called Myopic Books. And I used to go spend so much time going through all their books and looking at their plays. And I found this book that was of African dramas by what I came later to find out was Tessan Wome, who was the playwright, that she actually was the top female playwright in all of Africa. And she studied under Wole Soyinka. And anybody who has worked with African drama knows Brother Wole. He's still alive, very fabulous storyteller. But anyway, I had contacted her because I wanted to do this play, Parables for a Season, because it was all about community, and this is a community school. And I thought, what a great start. And it was perfect for an outdoor stage. That was the other thing that I thought. And I felt like the roles were fairly standard enough that whatever student body I had would be able to work with that. So anyway, we decided to do this play and they asked me about the play and I went through the whole thing with them. And I think that was one of the things that got me the job is that they really appreciated my vision. But the thing is, when we were doing the play, Nigel brought up this comment because we had talked about taking the students to some of the festivals that were happening around the world to try to boost their education, like the ISTA festivals, International Schools Theater Association. Well, one of the things that Nigel brought up with me and I thought was brilliant is he said, look, Mark, we can spend thousands of dollars and send 10 kids out to a festival. He said, but why don't we take that same money and invest it in bringing the playwright here? Well, y'all are going to be in production, the final production of the play, and she'll be here for the performances. And so I said, okay, well, let me do this. Well, to kind of backtrack a little bit, I had contacted her about doing the play, and I said, look, I cannot find the royalty fees anywhere in here. How much does it cost? She goes, well, the reason there's no royalty fees is because this play has never been produced before.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to do the world premiere of this play. And not only that, we got to bring Tess in. And, that could be intimidating for any theater artist because you've got the author right there breathing down your neck and you're wondering all the while. And I told her, I apologized before. I was like, look, I took the town crier position and I've separated the lines out and I've turned it into a Greek chorus. And I'm waiting for her response to this. And she's like, no, I'm the writer. You are the director. You are an artist as well. And whatever you decide to do with my play, that is up to you. That's your artistic expression. And that was really beautiful. But the other thing was when she came to our school and she stepped on that stage, oh my gosh, if you could have seen the way that my girls just lit up and took to her immediately. Like she brought this strength and this charisma with her that was just really beautiful. And so she stayed there. She was there for us and supported us throughout the entire production. She got to do workshops throughout our entire school with all the different grades of students. She's really a lovely person, and I'm actually still friends with her, and she recently sent me the rough draft of her memoirs that she wants me to look through it and give her some feedback. So that was really like a golden opportunity as a theater director and just an artist in general to be in Africa, working with African students. and having Tess come and visit us and just getting to share that with our community. And it was really a great starting point for me over there.
That's pretty cool.
What makes me feel for our panel of fine arts people that we had on, and of course, budget is one of the things that they said can be a limiting factor. And hopefully, if they do listen to this episode, they recognize what a golden opportunity instead of being jealous. But it would be hard not to be jealous. Imagine meeting the person who had written the play. That's just awesome. Thank you for that story. So we start with a guiding question, and our question for you, very relevantly, is what does recruiting for schools in Latin America entail? And since there's a huge answer to that with a lot of details, we're going to jump right into our supporting questions. And the first one is, let's start with geography. For educators looking to work in Latin America, should they organize their approach somewhat geographically? Are there some commonalities to the various regions? What do you think?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. I think that's an interesting question. I'm not so sure that geographically is the best way to look at it. I think more or less you kind of have to do your research on the countries. I mean, I think you hear this when you talk to recruiters who recruit regionally, like we're specific to Latin America, and that's all we recruit is Latin America. But the thing is, you'll hear this over and over that every country is different. And this is really true in Latin America. The customs are different, the way that they do things, and even some of the Spanish is different, which is horrible for somebody like me who's not great at Spanish. I mean, I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, but my wife runs circles around me with her language abilities. And so, yeah, you got to check each country out. It's a little bit different. I think one of the things that's going to come up later in this discussion or at some point in this discussion is security issues. And that also differs from country to country as well. And so that's why I think the research is really important. Even if you're working with a recruiter, I highly advise you, even if that's me, to do the research as well. Because and one of the things I tell the candidates is that, look, the security thing is a decision you've got to make for yourself. Everybody has a different threshold for security, and you've got to decide what's right for you and your family, and if you have children, that is something as well. But also, I think that the countries have different appeal to them. It's really like, what is it that you're looking for? Because Latin American countries really have a very profound culture. You can cross a border and really see that right away. If you're coming out of Chile and you're going through the Atacama Desert into Bolivia, stark difference when you get into Bolivia. But, it's different from country to country. And I think it's really interesting to do the research on your own and find out what these countries have to offer. Also, the other thing is I think is a really good tip that probably a lot of people wouldn't know except for a recruiter, is that when you go from recruiter to recruiter, each recruiter has their main countries that they work with. Some of the bigger recruiting companies deal with Brazil and Argentina and Chile because they have more money, okay? And so it's easier for them to be able to afford the services that the big recruiting companies do. Those are the three countries that I have the least recruitment in. I do have some in Argentina and some in Brazil, but it's not as much as the big companies. But we're really all over Central America, Colombia, and Mexico. Those are a really big one. And so look at that. I think that's a very important thing to look at is where are they posting jobs from? And if there's not that many jobs in the country that you're really interested in, you might want to switch recruitment companies because they probably haven't traveled that region or they just don't have those kind of connections there. And so if you're looking for Central America or Mexico, then you want to go to that recruiter that just has a bunch of posts for Mexico or wherever it is that you're looking for. And then the other thing to know about Latin America is this, but this is true all over the world, but certainly very true in Latin America, is a lot of people want to go out there and they pride themselves, and I used to do this too, in finding their own jobs, and they don't need a recruiter and all that. And of course you can do that. But the thing is, a lot of jobs do not ever get posted. Okay. And that's true more probably in Latin America than it is in other places, because they don't have to let candidates know that they're not going to hire them back sometimes until close to the end of the year. And so
Wow.
that happens a lot of times. Sorry, go ahead.
Nothing. I was just going to say, as a teacher, that is scary.
That is scary. It is scary, but it does happen, and sometimes it happens for a reason. And the thing why it's been explained to me, because I wasn't used to that, I'm like, no, once you've crossed that line of this is the deadline, I'm expecting to come back next year. But sometimes some candidates just don't work out, and they're worried about letting them know early in the year because they feel like they're either going to leave. And you see that a lot of times where people will walk out on their contract. And I don't agree with that either, but it happens sometimes. Or they just will phone it in and not really give their best for the rest of the year. And they want their students to be able to have a good year throughout. So it does happen. And if I'm being honest, it happens more than we like to see, but it is what it is.
So it sounds like what you're saying, if I'm interpreting correctly, is that rather than a regional approach, people should take it country by country. Is that right?
Yeah, or just investigate. What are you interested in? What is it you're looking for? And then think about it from that perspective. Which Latin American countries offer those kind of things? If you're looking for more beach, or you're looking for more mountains, or you're looking for mountains and beach, we got it all. Just look around and you'll find it.
Well, in Chile, they used to say you can get from the mountains to the beach in one day. So that was one of their
But don't
selling
forget,
points.
Chile's a cold water coast. It's
Fair
very
point.
cold.
Fair point.
Yeah.
So when I wrote that question, I was cringing because we say don't generalize about an entire continent or Central America and Mexico. But I think a lot came out of the way you answered that question. What's very intriguing is working with a recruiting agency who might specialize in certain areas. So that's some really important inside scoop. And we're going to talk more about recruiting in just a second. And so I'm going to move us to our next question, which again, I was cringing at and writing it and generalizing. But we've had some people on talking about Latin America, and they were able to share a little bit about some commonalities about school life. So let's talk about school life. And of course, we're talking about a great many countries and schools. They're all going to be different and have their own distinct personalities. But in general terms, are there some commonalities to Latin American schools? So it comes down to my question is, what might a first-time international teacher coming to Latin America, what might they experience in their classrooms and in their school community if there are some commonalities?
Yeah, I think there are. I think it's a good question. One of the things I find, and I actually was having this conversation with my students at the school that I'm working with to start a debate team and a debate circuit here in Chiapas. And one of the things that I told them that I really appreciate is that I feel like the students are very kind. One of the things about Latin Americans is they really are very adamant about teaching their children how to present themselves to an adult. How to walk up, shake their hand, greet them, give them a saludo, and to speak to them in an intelligent way. And so I find the students to be very kind, very nice students. They will walk up to you after class and they'll shake your hand and thank you for the lesson. The first time they did that for me, I was like, wow, where am I? And I really like that. That's one of the things I'm happy to be back here in Mexico, because I find the students here very friendly. They like to hang around after class and chat with you a bit. And that's very interesting. I also had that same kind of experience in Colombia as well. The students were very kind. They're very respectful. They really respect education. And while we could say, oh, well, that's just international schools, when I was in Colombia, I was actually working at one of Che Guevara's foundation schools, one of the Pies Descalzos. I wasn't working, I was volunteering there. And I was running a debate team there. And those kids, they're just so hungry for knowledge, you know. And when they found out that I had plays of Shakespeare in English and philosophy books in English, they were like, please let us borrow your books, you know, let us use your books. And so I would take my books in and have a little loaning library for them. And they really enjoyed that. And they wanted to read these things in English, you know, because they were just learning English. And so that's the other thing that I think is important. I think that because Latin America is a less wealthy region, that they offer lower pay and they also have a lower cost of living, something we'll get into more later. And maybe Latin America used to be lower in recruitment and international teaching, but that's no longer the case. We really have some very progressive heads of school and administrators out here that are just doing some great work. And I think that Latin America really has a lot to offer as far as education does. So I think that's another thing that people will find is that Latin America is more advanced than you think. I know when we were headed off to go to our first posting back in 2000 to Venezuela, we were wondering, like, what kind of place are we going to live in? Are they going to put us in like some little apartment block or something like that? And we got this gorgeous apartment, like nicer than any place I'd ever lived. And we were overlooking the pool and the tennis courts. And I remember the head of secondary school at that time, wonderful guy, Arnie Bieber. Maybe you know him. He's been around for a while. But anyway, I asked him, I said, do you remember that when you took us to our apartment from the airport for the first time and how happy we are? He goes, all I can remember is y'all jumping up and down because y'all love the apartment so much. And
Nice.
so I do think that Latin America has a lot more to offer in that respect. And then the other thing that I would say is that it's more laid back and more chill. I mean, that's why I love Latin America. That's why I came back here after I did my jaunt around the world, you know. And while I've had wonderful time in Asia and Africa as well, and very fond memories of that, Latin America is my vibe. I mean, I'm also Latino. I'm half Mexican from the United States, but it's definitely my vibe. And I just love the fact that it is more chill. And that's the way I wanted to do because I'm kind of a high intensity person a lot of times, and I'm trying to learn. 25 years later, I'm close to it. I'm getting there.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, on that note, I want to add I'm spending a lot of time on the subreddit for international teachers, international educators, and a lot of stories are coming out from different parts of the world, a lot of it in Asia, where teachers are not having a good work-life balance, that it's just so intense. The work expectations, very little time to have in school, just to breathe, to socialize with other people. So that's a bigger topic, I think, for our listeners as they look at schools, wherever they might be, that work, leisure, normal life balance. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that they can find in Latin America. I think Asia, that's a thing that's kind of common in Asia, right? The 996 thing. And I mean, I know that's meant for Asians, but I don't see that they will really see a difference. And I know when I was there, I mean, I was at what some people might, I don't like this term, the top tier school thing. You know, I was at a school that was probably considered top tier or close to top tier. And we did work a lot, but also my gig was in fine arts. And so obviously, you know, we as fine arts teachers always say our day starts when you all are going home, you know.
Exactly.
So we're used to that and it's not a big deal. But I also noticed that a lot of other teachers put in those long hours as well. And I think that's just something that comes with Asia as part of it. And that's why I wanted to emphasize that about Latin America, because I see those same stories. I'm a Reddit hog too. You know, I love Reddit sometimes. It depends on what you're looking at. But anyway, and so I see those stories a lot as well. And I think also that's part of the thing that we had off mic earlier was talking about these conglomerates that are buying up the schools and they're for-profit schools. And I think that that's going to be part of what we're going to see more and more of as the conglomerates buy more schools.
Well, hopefully, at least a few of them will have that idea of work life balance because I think it's becoming more of a common thinking among international schools. So we'll see where it goes. The whole SEL, wellness, work life balance, etc., has permeated the international school world. So let's hope that schools are acting responsibly. But you suggested that formerly Latin America was thought of as the place where people would go and wouldn't be as quality schools or wouldn't have as good benefit package, et cetera. But let's talk a little bit about benefits and things. So what about salary benefits, particularly health insurance? We're wondering in general, again, generalizing is not always recommended, but what kind of things will people find when they look at schools in the various countries in Latin America?
I do think you have to speak in general about this one because there are some schools out there that still do the whole package and stuff. And some of that's changing as well because of the point that we just talked about a second ago. But one of the things that I try to get across and I try to be very upfront with people is the salaries are going to be lower here because there is a lower cost of living. If you look at Colombia, for example, Colombia is one of the cheapest countries in the world to live in and to retire in. In fact,
Mm,
like where everybody has to have at least $1 million to retire in the United States, they're saying that a 65-year-old person could easily retire on $250,000 in Colombia. Okay.
wow.
And that probably is true. And while they have had some inflation, as everybody did during the pandemic and post pandemic, it still has a lower cost of living. But people want to come here and they want to compare their salaries to what they made in the US. And they're like, there's no way I can accept less than what I was making in the US or what I was making in Asia. And I'm like, you don't get it. And we have a whole slew of these cost of living calculators and websites and stuff like that to help them. And I try to encourage them. Even now, I've gotten to, on every single one of my job postings on my website, at the very bottom, we put the Numio link on there and ask them, please check this out. You can compare how much money you need to live here versus where you were living before. And so you can make those kind of comparisons or you can see what it's like. Also, I mean, like if you look at Mexico City, and Mexico City really is very expensive right now. It got like 2 or 3 times more expensive, it seemed like to me. When I was there for a wedding in November, I was kind of shocked at my check for dinner, since I was buying. But it is more. But like we're here in Tuxtla Gutierrez, and we just came from Costa Rica, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. It's like a third of the cost of Costa Rica. And so that's something people don't know about Costa Rica, or some people do, some people don't. Costa Rica is one that's gotten to be quite expensive as well. But it's just because everybody's going there. And so those kind of things happen. I mean, all the digital nomads wound up in Mexico City. Who could blame them? It's one of in my opinion, it's the greatest city in the world. I love Mexico City. And so that's, I think, the big thing that people need to understand. Even having said that, though, I would also say you've got to understand that also eventually your savings potential is probably not going to be as much as it is in Southeast Asia or the Middle East or China, where you can easily save $30, $40, $50,000 a year. In those other countries, probably not that much, maybe about 10,000 if you're careful with your money. And then also you get the finiquito at the end, what you were putting into retirement, that all comes back to you at the end. So that's kind of a hidden savings that's there. But I'd still say to just be on the conservative side, you could probably save $10,000 to $15,000 a year per person in Latin America. So it's not as much. And the big thing I tell people, if you've got big bills outside of Latin America, like you have a mortgage to pay or really high student loans or something like that, maybe this is not the time for you to come to Latin America. Go to Asia, Middle East, make your bank, and then come on back when you're ready for the lifestyle. Because that's what I'd sell Latin America on, is lifestyle. You really have a hard time beating Latin America for lifestyle. Some other little tips that I think David will like that are very specific to Latin America but don't always happen, but sometimes they do. Not all schools will give you full tuition for your children,
Hmm.
even if you just have one. Some will do one and then partial of another, or sometimes it's 75% for each one of your children. And so you really, if you have children, you need to get that out there up front. There are some schools that will give you full tuition, and this is one of the areas you can negotiate on. Y'all said y'all are on Reddit. One of the things that pisses me off on Reddit is when they go, "Oh, you can't negotiate. You can't negotiate." Yes, you can negotiate. Probably not for money, though. It's probably not the best idea when they have a salary list package that they have that's standard. It's harder to get them to move away from that. But it's not hard to get them to move away from, okay, give me 25% more for my students' tuition, or let me have 2 placements in your school, or other things. When I worked in Sudan, this lady negotiated that she got to do horseback riding after school. You
What?
can negotiate, yeah. And they did, because we had a stable and horses and all that. And so she got to do that. I just use that because it's kind of an out there example. But the thing is, negotiating is not always about money. Sometimes it could be about another off period. Sometimes it could be about professional development. There's lots of different things you can negotiate for. And that's something I try to help our candidates understand as well. Insurance can be the same way. Insurance and flights. Let me just cover those both with that, because it's the same thing. You don't always get insurance for the whole family. You don't always get flights for the whole family. You have to ask these questions up front, and it's very important that you do that. But these can also be negotiable as well. If they want you enough, they'll find a way to come up with it. But I think they just try to minimize their costs because, like we said, it's a lower cost of living, lower salaries. It's hard to make money in Latin America. Trust me. I've been doing this 13 years over here, and it is tough, but there's definitely a lot of things to like about it. And I want to be honest and straightforward. This was one of the lessons I learned from Nigel when I went to Sudan, because Sudan is a hardship post, and I'm sure most people are aware of that, especially now that they're in a horrible civil war. But the thing is that get it all up there up front, the good, bad, and the ugly. Let people know what it is so that they can make the decisions for themselves, and then they know what to expect when they come into it. And that's what I try to do. I don't try to sell people on some place that I don't think they're going to be happy or what they're not looking for. So that's what I would say about the salary and benefits packages in Latin America in general. There are still a handful of schools that will go all the way with it. And there are still some schools out there, 5 schools. Email me, I'll give you the list of those 5 schools out there that really you can earn really top salaries that are competitive with Asia and the Middle East. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for all that inside scoop, because the negotiation, that makes total sense. And for our listeners, that so often the salary scale, it's on a piece of paper, it's digitally printed, everyone knows what it is. But the idea for the other areas of the package to be able to negotiate on that. And I'm just going to throw in a real quick personal story back to the timing and the stage of life. We were in Saudi, one of the biggest packages you could ever have, and we're about to have our second child, and we wanted my wife to not work, and we wanted our kids to learn Spanish. So we went to Central America, and it turned out to be a good stay. Our boys were not in the school. They were just too young, so there was nothing about their tuition, but we put them in a local kindergarten. They learned Spanish, at least at that stage. So start thinking about that as possibilities. Maybe you're towards the end of your career and you're thinking, when we've done a couple shows on this, where do you want to retire to if you want to stay overseas? So maybe go to that country that you think might be a place that you want to retire to. So just a couple more thoughts to all the helpful information that you're sharing. So let's expand a little bit more on what life is like. You're sharing about the laid back nature, the sociability, the friendly people, the low cost of living. And you've got a blog post on your site all about kind of the highlights of life outside of school. So what are some other areas of life outside of school? Let's get into culture a little bit. And you did mention earlier safety. So what are some things people need to think about there?
Sure. Well, I think I covered the safety issue. I do think people need to do the research on their own, and I will help them with that. And one of the things, though, that I do think is an important point is like, look, one of the only things I hate about teaching debate is sometimes I have to teach seventh graders that the world sucks. You know,
Nice.
I don't like that part of it because I don't want to scare them. I don't want them to feel bad about the world and stuff or any worse than they do already. But what I do tell people that are coming to Latin America and they're concerned about this, because what some people know about Latin America is really only what they've seen on Netflix or whatever. And, and what I tell them is like, look, okay, that stuff does happen, but when you're doing the research, what I want you to think about is how much of that stuff that you're seeing happens to people like us. We're generally pretty safe, you know. If you see the research of things that have happened or you look up articles and things, it's not happening to people like us or people in schools. Granted, anything could happen to anyone anywhere. It could happen to you in Chicago. It could happen to you in Paris. It has happened in those cities this week, you know? And so anything could happen wherever you're at. You should always be careful. But it's not really a reason to shy away from Latin America. And the last thing is, we don't recruit for countries that we don't feel, if I don't feel comfortable going there, I won't send somebody there. If I wouldn't send my wife there, I won't send your wife there or your family there. And so that's one of the things that I'm very particular about. And also, I just think that still people have to do their own research. So the one you left out, oh my God, you're going to feel really bad about this too. The food, man, the food. Oh my God, we just found taco heaven over here in Tuxtla Gutierrez. You know, with this place, this guy's going to get sick of seeing us, or he's going to put us on the payroll. One of the two, I don't know. But anyway, man, it's so hard to beat the food in Latin America. There's all kinds of food, and each country has its own. And like when you come to Mexico, you realize each city has its own main dish, you know, that they love to brag about, you know, and they deserve it. And also, you go to different countries and they have all kinds of different foods. I'm really missing the chief frijol from Costa Rica right now. The chicharrones in like a rice and bean dish. And oh my God, it's fantastic. So the food is a big thing. The other thing is the arts. Latin America loves the arts. They actually encourage their children to work in the arts.
Woohoo!
I love that, you know? And so they take the arts very, very serious. The one, though, that is a little disappointing to me is not many schools, though, have IB theater programs. And I think the
Huh.
IB theater curriculum is fabulous. And it's a shame that they don't, but I think they see it as it's really expensive, where it's easier for them to do music and big groups and visual arts. Those are the ones that are really popular in schools. But you will see theater that is done in the community. But I think it's not the most prominent of the arts. But that could also because my Spanish isn't perfect. So I struggle a little bit sometimes when I go to see plays in Spanish. You know, if they're good, you don't need to know the language. You can figure out what's going on stage just by watching them. So that's a big part of it. I wanted to go into another part of this that's more than just the culture, the part about who comes to Latin America and why do they come here. So mostly we get a lot of young teachers that are just starting out, or we get a lot of older people, as David mentioned, that are looking for retirement. One of the things that has happened, a lot of people have come to Latin America since the pandemic. If they're from the United States or Canada or even Latin America itself, because it's just so much easier for them to get home if an emergency comes up. So I have noticed that, and there's a lot of people that are concerned, you know, or if you have elderly parents or elderly family members, you want to be close by in case something happens. So we do get a lot of young teachers who are just coming out and they're not as competitive in the Middle East or in China, and they want to break into international teaching. We get them. And like I said, we get the older candidates who've already made their big money and they're sitting on a nice nest egg and they're just looking for some place with the life-work balance like you talked about, and also that they may possibly choose to retire in the future, you know. And so we get those candidates as well. But we also get the middle-aged candidates too that are either trying to learn about international curriculum, because as we all know, the IB is the golden ticket going around the world. I like the IB program. I know there's some people that maybe don't prefer it, but if you want to really get into some of the competitive schools, you have to know about the IB. But the other thing why it's really good for mid-career candidates to come to Latin America is it's a great place to break into administration, also because it's less competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the other thing about administration here is the salaries and benefits for administrators here is just about on par with other parts of the world. I think that's
Hmm.
another little secret people don't know about Latin America, that you can make the kind of salary as an administrator that you might make in Asia, that you might make in the Middle East. Sometimes you won't. It just really depends on the school. But a lot of the schools do offer quite good salaries. So that's who I think Latin America's for. It's for everyone. It's for lovers too. That's another thing that comes
Yeah.
up all the time. The dating scene, especially it seems like, I don't know if it's women have it harder than men in that aspect or whatever, but I read about that where people are like, I want someone where I can date. And I'm like, oh man, Latin America. That's what Latin America was made for. And
Hmm.
I actually met my current wife in Mexico here. And
There it is.
Well, let me interject on that, Mark, because that's a huge one. And you've just covered three different groups. And I was picking up that Latin America is a place for people to come and spread their wings, try new things. They're going to be supported, maybe being innovative educators and such. But that aspect of one's personal life and having life with a partner, dating in general, is huge. And in my years, as I was aging through the system and young teachers coming in at different schools, there were places where people would say, boy, it's difficult to date with the local population. There's just a barrier. And so that is a huge one that I'm going to share with my son, Maxwell, who's always looking to meet new people. Max, if you're listening. So thanks for sharing that. So, you had more. Go,
I want
keep
to add,
going.
yeah, I want to add one other thing in there too. Latin America is very LGBTQ friendly as well. And I think that's another very important thing to know, and for administrators as well. And it's getting, I think, better and better all the time. And I think that's the way it should be all over the world. I'm just not the boss of the whole world. But
Yeah.
Latin America definitely does a great job in that aspect as well.
Awesome. Well, we've kind of dipped our toes into the concept of recruiting already, but let's look a little more deeply at it. How do you advise your clients to prepare for recruiting in Latin America? Like timeline, direct contact with schools or not, recruiting fairs, regional organizations to get resources and tips, and so on. What's your general advice there?
Yeah, one of the things I don't like is I feel like people are pushing this thing about, oh, the recruiting season is starting now. It's September. And I'm like, okay, relax. First of all, it isn't really full on. In fact, I was reading something about some people who went to one of the job fairs, and most of the schools were saying, oh, it's so early, we don't even know what we're going to do. And that's what I've been saying all along. I'm like, you don't even know what's going to happen yet. You're just out there seeing what fish are in the pond, right now. I think the schools are pushing that more than it really needs to be pushed. I tell people, like, look, okay, we really get started in January. But this year, I'm already getting them. Latin America is usually one of the later recruiting calendars, and I don't know if it's just because of the mañana thing or it's just because they feel like they're less competitive, and so they wait their turn to do the recruitment. I'm not sure which one of those is, but I've already got schools that are interviewing candidates for next August, and we don't typically get that in Latin America this early on. But this year, I haven't had a break. I've been just full on through the entire summer. We still have a load of immediate hires, a load of January, February starts. And we've got 2 or 3 schools that have already come in for August next year. And one of them's already recruiting. And I'm like, wow. So I might be wrong, Maybe the season is moving up, but I also feel like people are pushing that as well. We help our candidates out. We provide a full service for not only the schools, but the candidates as well. And so some of the things I would say, this goes back to part of what I was talking to David about a while ago. Don't fish in just one pond. I think it's smart to have 2 or 3 recruitment agencies that you're working with. And as I mentioned, it's very important to try to use recruitment agencies, or at least some of the web pages that are posting jobs and stuff like that, or social media, because a lot of stuff doesn't get posted. And so that's something that I think people are missing out on if they're just trying to do it on their own. And I respect that totally. I used to do it that way myself. And I think that's actually how I wound up in recruitment. But that's something that they need to be considering. I think the hiring fairs are not that popular here. There are quite a few more now, as you can see online, but I hear more negativity about the fairs, that there's just not really that much out there. And even from the schools are saying it's hard to get candidates to come to the fairs. And we used to do a fair when I first started doing this. I think we did it for 4 or 5 years. And it was really, really hard to get candidates to come from all around the world or wherever they were at to come to the fair. And I did not like the idea of trying to say, yeah, these are the 70 candidates that we have that showed up today. I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so I've stopped doing anything with the fairs. I've considered doing the online fairs, but I never hear anybody really talk about them in a very positive way. I think maybe it's hard to do the online fairs. I haven't tried it. I reckon in my mind it's like running a debate tournament, but I'm not exactly sure about that. So the fairs are not really that big of a thing, although there are a couple of fairs. But one of the big recruitment agencies did have a fair out here in Latin America that they're no longer doing. And I think that might tell you something as well. And then the other thing is be patient. Nothing happens quickly in Latin America. That's one thing I've tried to learn in my years here, 25 years of working on it. I'll get there eventually, but being patient is really important. And then I have it, do your own research on the security, but I think we amply covered that topic there. So those are kind of the things that I think that are out there in regards to recruiting that you need to be aware of when you're coming to this region to recruit. Look around. Be open for a surprise. You'd be surprised how many places can really offer stuff that you never even thought about. And I think that the people that are open-minded like that and not just one country focused or whatever, that they probably get more out of this than others do.
So let me connect a little bit more. You mentioned immediate hires, and when we had Diane on, that was another discussion point of schools hiring in August, or in this case, right now in October. So what is that market like in Latin America for, we'll call them late hires, or even into the school year hires, or middle of the year school hires? What does that look like?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that in the previous question. I got carried away there about the food or something. But anyway, the thing is that that's the other thing that keeps us busy too, is we have 2 hiring seasons here because we also have the Southern Hemisphere schools. Mm-hmm. Now, they're not anywhere close to a majority of the schools, but we have schools that start either in late January or in February. Occasionally you'll catch 1 or 2 of them that start at the beginning of March as well. But that's when their school year starts, and they go all the way through November, the end of November, or early December, depending on when they started as well. So there's a lot of those schools out there, mostly in South America. There's a few of them in Central America, a couple of them that use that same calendar as well. And the thing is that we try to recruit candidates from South Africa, Australia, places like that, because they have the same calendar, okay? So we're trying to get that. And also some in the UK. I think they can leave after Christmas. I think they can declare their contracts at an end at that point. And so sometimes we get UK candidates. But one of the things that those schools do is because they know it's difficult for them to recruit because the main recruiting season happens with people who are on the North American calendar that start in August. Most everybody starts in August now. Occasionally you'll see a school here and there that starts in September, but mostly it's August. But what they'll do is they'll let those teachers leave in the middle of the year so that they can go get back on the North American calendar system. And so they've made that agreement with them, and that's how they're able to recruit those teachers when they want to leave. But then also that opens up stuff in the middle of the year. We also get a lot of, like I always tell people, something's always happening in Latin America. There's always jobs, and we have a lot of immediate hire positions right now that we're trying to fill or we're trying to fill. I think that's slowing down a bit as we're coming towards the end of the semester already. I don't know how that happened, but we're already there. But the thing is, it just things happen. Some people, we have people that don't show up for their job that they signed a contract for. We have people that come out and they realize this isn't for them. Or we have people who just don't make it. They don't cut it. And there's that 3-month window where the school or the teacher can decide whether they want to leave, and some of them do. Or the school says, this is just not working. We're going to have to let you go. And that happens, and I guess they have to make those hard decisions for their school and do the right thing. It's nothing nefarious or underhanded or anything. They're just trying to do what's best for their school. And sometimes it doesn't always work out for people. And so we have those things. I used to really not like dealing with that, but I've realized there's all kinds of reasons that those happen. And the other thing that we take in mind too when we're getting candidates during this time is a lot of times it seems like the presumption goes against the candidate and it's always in favor of the school. And I listen to people and I'll listen to what they said and I'll even check in with their school. We do the confidential reference checks on candidates and stuff, and we'll find out it's not always the candidate's fault. And we're open to that and we're willing to listen. And if they've got a story that we think is legit, they're going to have to pull a reference from that school anyway. So we're willing to listen to them and willing to work with it. And if their references come back fine, and a lot of times the schools were like, yeah, we mutually agreed that it was best for them to move on, or they thought it was best for them to move on. And we're fine with that. We don't encourage anyone to break a contract, though. That's a part I'm really still very, very adamantly against that. All the schools I worked in, if you broke your contract, your career was over. I tell people the world's a big place, but the international schools market is very small and everybody knows each other. And if you screw up, that could be really a nail in the coffin for your career, doing the wrong thing. So it is what it is.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that your big season kind of really gears up in January, but actually to some degree you're going all year long as well.
Yeah, you're awesome. That was the part I've left out. Yes, that's right. We gear up in January, but right now we've already got jobs for August. So if anybody wants to have a look, they're there on the website.
Sounds good.
As we're winding up, I'm already thinking of the way I'm going to introduce this episode. And one of the key words is secrets. So you're sharing secrets and inside scoop that I think is going to be so helpful towards educators looking at Latin America. What are some trends? What's around the corner in the direction that international education is going? And we know there's a wave that's going around the world constantly with the movement of for-profit schools coming in. So that's a topic. And maybe there are other trends that you can speak to.
Yeah, I think the for-profit thing is happening. You're right. And it is happening all over the world. What I'm sitting here seeing, and I've been tracking this since like 2014, I think. I was looking back in my files where I started first tracking and noticing that there were companies like some of the big companies that we can't mention right now that are buying up schools. Some of them have been around for a while, but this is happening more and more because they've realized that international schools are quite profitable. I think the number that I read or saw somewhere is that international schools have a 30% profitability per year,
Wow.
which is quite a good return on your money if you can get that. And so a lot of these organizations are buying them up. They're becoming part of people's retirement programs and things like that. And so one of the things, though, I think that's naturally going to happen in for-profit schools is that salary and benefits are going to be cut. I think that they're going to try to keep as much of the quality as they can, but while maximizing their profit. And the thing that I mentioned earlier is when you can see that 80 to 85% of a school's budget is their salary and benefits, well, it's a no-brainer where they're going to cut from.
Yeah.
So I think that some of the things we're going to see is maybe less housing. We're already seeing that to some extent where schools are not offering housing or they're offering a housing allowance that doesn't really fully cover that. So I think you're going to see that. That's happening in Latin America, but that's happening all over the world as well. As some of the shortcuts that I think that some of the schools are taking in Latin America, where they don't give flights to the whole family or maybe offer full extended international insurance to the whole family, I think you're going to see more and more of that. What I hope doesn't happen is that the quality of international schools doesn't go away. And I hope that the atmosphere of international schools doesn't go away. Because I think the atmosphere of the international school is not just important to the people who work at the school, but it's important in the communities that you live in. Because we share this with other people. When I was in Kuala Lumpur, I was the organizer for the SEA Forensics Tournament where we did debate and forensics activities, and we had around 25 schools, and almost all of them were local schools, and only a few international schools came to our tournament every year. And they did the training with us. We offered free training for it. And I think that that's an important thing. We used to share going back and forth to each other's play productions. I would take my students to go see some of the local schools' play productions or some of the plays that were being put on in the local theaters in their own community and stuff like that. And so I worry about that. You know, the school is kind of a home base for those of us that are expats, whether we work in the school or we don't work in the school. We find that as a base for us where we can make contact with our people when we need to. And also we can meet other people from the community in there. And that's what I'm scared that's going to happen, is that it's going to become too much of a business and less of a school. That's one of the big trends that's happening out there. The other thing is schools are popping up everywhere. So I don't know what that's going to mean. When you look at the ISC research stuff that they keep putting out, first of all, they do a great job with their information and the sharing of their information, but the number of schools that are coming on board out there. And my concern is, so wait a second though, we have teacher shortages all over the world, particularly in the most developed countries. What's going to happen in that struggle for teachers there? Is that going to be the weapon that we have to keep the salary and benefits while we're working abroad? Or are they just going to forget about expat teachers and say, the hell with this, let's just hire local, or that kind of thing. The other thing that I'm trying to start as a trend, and this is happening, and this was something that was a big discussion during the pandemic, was about having more equality in hiring. And this is the thing, my last two talks that I've done at LAC, the Latin Americans Head Conference, which if they're not on your radar, they should be. They are the organization for the British schools in Latin America, and they're a great organization. And they've let me do a couple of talks with them. And my last couple of talks are, you know what? If this is true, if the demographics of the world is true, where we're having a lower population in Western countries, and on top of that, less and less students are entering university to become teachers, where are you going to get your teachers from in 10 years from now? And if it's going to be the Middle East and Northern Africa, the MENA, which still has the high birth rates, and that's where a lot of the workforce is predicted to come from in 10 years. Why aren't we hiring those teachers now? Why are we
Mm.
still in international schools, and I'll just say it like it is, discriminating against those teachers? And so we accept those teachers into our organization and we tell them, look, you know what it's like. I don't have to tell you, you're from Nigeria. You know what it's like to apply in the international teaching community. It's going to be difficult. But if you have the right credentials, we will put you forward. And we are putting them forward, and we are getting these candidates hired. Still not on the level of all the candidates that are coming from Western native English speaking countries and stuff like that, but it's happening, and our schools are taking them on. And I'll tell you this, I was pleasantly surprised and very proud of our client schools that so many of them are willing to give these candidates a chance and interview them. It's happening. And even one of my schools that I've been recruiting with for a long time, he said, our two best teachers are from Africa.
Awesome.
And I was really pleased. Yeah, I was really pleased to hear that. And we've had some really good luck with some of the teachers coming from some of the countries. I worked with the South Africans when I was in Sudan. Amazing educators, very well educated, and very nice people to work with. And we're having a lot of luck, and a lot of these candidates coming out of Ghana, very educated, very strong teachers. And we're also seeing this with some of the candidates from some of the other countries as well. And even some of the Latin American countries that maybe some of the schools try to avoid. The Venezuelan teachers are amazing. They're hard to beat. And a lot of them were looking for jobs and still are to some extent while they're waiting for their country to recover. And I worked in Venezuela for 2 years and have great memories of working with some really fabulous educators there. So those are some of the trends that I see out there. I'm hoping some of the good ones keep getting stronger and some of the bad ones aren't as bad as we think that they are.
Well, let's hope. And I loved hearing about the diversity, the movement. I think that's another thing that is not going to go away and hopefully will only continue to improve as more and more people push for that to be the norm.
My opinion is it has to. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has to.
Well, that's a good point. Yes, with the shortage and so on. You're very, very accurate there. Anything else you'd like to share that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think if you let me do a couple of last things that are kind of pitchy, but yeah, the thing I just want people to know is that even though we're a small boutique recruitment company, we offer full service for our candidates and for our schools, start to finish service. We're with them all the way. We will meet with them if need be. We will talk them through anything that they need to talk about with our schools as well. We do start to finish where we are advertising them on our website, on our social media, on our newsletter that we put out monthly. We vet the candidates. We brief the candidates on the school and also where they're going before the interviews. We will help our schools with interview setting. We do confidential reference checks. And then in that little part of the back and forth after the confidential reference checks and before the hiring, the candidates usually have questions that they want to ask, or sometimes the schools do as well. And I serve as the liaison between those two entities in answering those questions or trying to, get answers for the questions. Because a lot of times the candidates don't want to do it because they don't want to seem like they're being pushy or that they're bothering anybody. And I tell them, well, that's my job, is to be pushy. So I'll go over there and I'll ask the questions for them and I'll keep the communication going. One of the things that I've also made my own work to do for this is I really try to help teachers who are just getting started in education, who are just getting started as teachers, and also people who are just new to international education. Because if you step back and you think about it, before you got into international education, I didn't even know what it was. My ex-wife introduced me to it. She had come back from teaching in Thailand when I met her, and I was like, oh, I didn't know they did this. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but I just never even thought about it. And so that's what one of my friends, who's also a consultant in Mexico, JP Mint, says it's the best kept secret out there still, international teaching. And it is, but I think people are starting to look abroad more and more now, especially since the pandemic and people realize they can travel and go outside their little garden, or whatever. So that's happening too.
I think it's fun that you know Jacqueline. We also are friends with Jacqueline. And of course, we agree on the best kept secret piece. I think the secret's getting out a little more now that we have more technology to spread the word than back in the day when the three of us might have been sort of starting out and, just by complete chance found out about it. But
Yeah.
I definitely think that more and more people are hearing about it, which is great. Like you said, there's a shortage. So we definitely need more teachers out there. And hopefully, more and more, it's going to be people from all over the place who are just exploring the world and being ambassadors for we're more similar than we are different, and just spreading the joy of connecting and helping students to see that yes, the world can be a tough place, but it's also such a beautiful place in so many ways. You just got to look with the right mindset, the right perspective. So
We owe
thank
it
you
to
so
our
much for that.
students.
We do.
Yeah.
We totally do.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other new services that we're adding that I'm excited about as well. One of them is we've started doing a global job search. I've been doing this with some people that needed assistance with this, that are looking for jobs, not just in Latin America, but globally. And I thought about this. I'm like, hey, this is a great idea. Instead of them being tied to one or two or three recruiters, imagine if they had the whole world to look at, or whatever countries or regions that they want to do. So what we do is we provide them with the global job search assistance. And what comes with that is our interview consulting that we do. We also help them with their cover letters and check all their letters before they go out. We also help them actually go out and find the jobs, because I have access to 10 or 15 job boards and then other recruiters like myself around the world that share their jobs with me. And a lot of times we'll talk between each other and go, hey, do you have somebody for this? So I can help these people find positions around the world. We'll help them do the research on the school, and we've also helped them doing the research on the interview team as well. And that's been really, really productive for them. So we are able to provide them all those services while they're at work. And especially if you're an administrator, you hardly have time to have lunch sometimes. And so we're able to go out there and find the information out there for them, do the research for them, hand it off to them, and prep them out for the interviews. And this has been very, very successful. And it's a paid service, though. All of our other services on our website, if you're signing up on our website, are free. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but we've always been free for candidates, and we always will be. But the other thing is that we now offer this on top of our resume and interview consulting as well. The other thing that I'm looking at doing is, and we've already started this rolling, is we want to franchise out. We want to franchise different regions around the world. But I haven't really announced it. And actually, this is the announcement right here because,
Woohoo!
yeah, surprise, because I'm looking for like-minded people like myself. I'm looking for people who want to give the personal touch, who want to talk to people. And that's what I tell people, is like, look, my email, if you have questions, just ask me here. I'm happy to answer. I try to always answer on the same day that I get your email, and I pride myself in that. And we're looking for people who are either looking to go for early retirement, or this could be for like a couple or a team that are looking for extra income. And we want particularly people who live in the specific region that they're going to be recruiting for, like I do, and that they're willing to offer the personalized service. Because one of the things you'll notice about our company, all of our front facing is in person. We don't do anything with AI or anything like that front facing. We want to keep it like that. We want to answer your questions, and we want to be able to jump on a call with you if we can do that. And the other thing I always invite people to do, hey, if you're ever passing through Tuxtla Gutierrez or Chiapas here, or you can catch me while I'm at our house in Barranquilla, Colombia, stop in, let's have a coffee or a beer or lunch together. I'm always open for that. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I'm looking for some people like that are interested in their own recruitment agency. And my big pitch is I can save you 5 years of agony of all the trial and error that you go through when you're starting up a company, because I understand what contracts will sell. I understand what the schools want. I understand what the candidates want. As the book says, it took me 10 years to become an overnight sensation.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So I'm hearing a couple things. Well, many things. One is recruiting anywhere in the world. It's going to be helpful to have a consultant. And with Jacqueline, and there are other ones out there, Valeria as well, and there are many others. It makes so much sense to have like a team approach. In your case, you're offering these consultancy services. And you're also saying about Latin America, there are a lot of nuances. And just the whole idea that the openings are not always going to be out there on the regular posting places. You got to get inside under the hood, as I say, a little bit to find that. And then I'm really loving this idea for people who want to do a side gig, or someone like myself who's retiring that has a lot of knowledge and doesn't really realize it, and you know a region really well, that you can become a consultant. And I really appreciate the idea that you've got this toolkit from 10 years and longer of doing this work that you can franchise out to people. So thank you for all that. And just let's remind people how they can follow you. So let's do your website, if you can tell us more about Weber's Ed, and your LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn almost every day. That's one. If they want to register on our website, as I said, it's free. And also, it only takes about 30 minutes because we do not ask you to repeat your CV on our website. I hate that.
Thank you.
I didn't design the website, but I created what I wanted on there, or I made a list. And I have a wonderful web designer here in Mexico that did my website, and I love my website. It's been very, very good to me. And so it takes only about 30 minutes to register on our website, and it's free, like I said. And if you do that, you're automatically signed up for the newsletter. You can always sign off if you don't want the newsletter. You can always back out of it. But LinkedIn is a big one for me. Facebook is still a big one for me, even though I'm not a real big fan of Facebook, but they're great for advertising, and there's some great groups on there, like Kirsten Durward's group on international educators. Reddit, I love Reddit. I'm glad to hear so many more of y'all are on Reddit as well. And not Instagram. I suck at Instagram. So don't look at that one. It's a mess.
Well, awesome. You've got your finger in a whole bunch of pies, and you're really enthusiastic and spreading the joy. And we love to hear that. And the fact that your service is free is wonderful for people to know, and really appreciating your mindset that let's do this together. Let's get to know each other. Let's take it easy as well and not, overthink it. And I know what you're doing is a great service for Latin America, and it's going to be spread throughout the world. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. We really appreciate you meeting with us and all the insights that you shared. Like David said, the secrets are going to be out now. Thanks again.
Good. I'm glad to share those. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
And David.
inviting you to travel,
Teach.
and connect with us.